sind wir wieder auf der Spoger Horse Stage und ich darf jetzt eine ganz besondere Keynote ankündigen, denn sie wird von einer ganz besonderen Frau gehalten, auf die wir uns alle jetzt freuen können. Nicht nur hier in Halle 7, diejenigen, die jetzt hier gerade zu uns kommen, genau, nehmen Sie Platz, alle mal herkommen, alle mal hinsetzen. Hier sind noch einige Plätze frei, es lohnt sich auf jeden Fall. Wir sprechen nämlich über persönliches und kommerzielles Branding. Das hört sich jetzt erstmal groß und wild an. Was heißt das genau? Es geht darum, wer sind wir überhaupt? Wie verkaufen wir uns? Wie machen wir aus uns selber eine Marke, eine persönliche Marke, aber eben nachher auch eine kommerzielle Marke? Wie kann man sich zum Beispiel als Reiter, als Mensch, was auch immer, für Marken so positionieren, dass man nachher für die Brands auch interessant ist und selber eine richtige Marke im Reitsport werden? Und darüber redet eine Frau, die da definitiv was zu sagen hat. Und ich denke, die meisten von Ihnen, auch von Ihnen zu Hause, werden diese Dame schon mal gesehen haben. Mein erster Eindruck damals, als ich sie das allererste Mal gesehen habe, war, dass ich ein Foto gesehen habe, wo sie auf einem Pferd saß, wo sie über einen sehr hohen Ochser geflogen ist und hinter ihr war sehr, sehr viel Haar bzw. sehr, sehr viele Federn. Sie hat nämlich einen sehr, sehr auffälligen Kopfschmuck und ich war so, was? Wer ist das denn? Dann habe ich ein bisschen recherchiert. Sie ist sehr erfolgreich. Sie hat unter anderem an den Olympischen Spielen teilgenommen, ist Springreiterin, aber auch Entrepreneur und sie wird jetzt eben genau darüber reden. OwnyouRIDEntity ist ihre Keynote und hier ist Dani G, Waldman.
Hi everybody, welcome. Before I tell you anything about myself, do you guys know who I am? Does anyone know? So I was a former show jumper. I went to the Olympics, I competed at the highest levels, and I was one of the first people to sort of cultivate a personal brand in show jumping as an athlete. So basically, let's start. There's a lot of things out there that have been said about me because of the way that I sort of present myself, but good and bad. But I'm sort of curious, I want to start with you guys a little bit. What is the first thing you guys see when you see me because of the feathers? I want to hear. Tell me something. Just the feathers? Okay. All right, so maybe you sort of just know me as the kooky girl with the feathers. And maybe some of you think of me as a rider who got bullied online a couple of years ago for wearing very atypical clothing in competition and got told I was bad for the sport and I was ruining show jumping. Maybe you disagreed a little bit with things you've heard that I did with horse care. Maybe you just think of me as a unique individual who isn't afraid to be herself. As you can see, I wore very atypical things. Best yet, hopefully you think of me as a strong-willed, independent, empowered woman who believes everyone just wants to be seen for who they are. Someone who owns her identity. Today, however, we are here to talk about how to differentiate yourself for commercial appeal. Basically, how to make yourself stand out and shine from the rest. We sort of call that brand building these days. And this goes for individuals and companies, whether you are building a personal brand or whether you are building as an athlete or selling a product for commercial enterprise. A brand is a term we usually use to be able to easily recognize and remember and to distinguish ourselves from our competitors. And to our brand, to be visible, you must do 3 not so simple things. The first of which is perform well. The second is you must be distinctive. Figure out what makes you stand out from the rest. And the third is tell an engaging story. So you need to keep it interesting and something that engages with your audience. The key to achieving either of those first two, performing well and being distinctive, are to try and figure out what your strengths are, build on them, and highlight them. Not only will your audience find that appealing, but it will also give you internal confidence. Who doesn't want to put their best foot forward, right? And a lot of it comes down to self-awareness. That's really the root of self-confidence. So how do we become more self-aware? As individuals and as companies, we start by acknowledging and recognizing those strengths and weaknesses. So when I was competing in the arena, back when I was still competing, my best rounds came at a time when I was prepared because I had worked on my weaknesses at home and I acknowledged my strengths as a rider. And I knew the strengths and weaknesses of my horse. I wasn't great at execution. That was one of my weaknesses. So in the warm-up arena, I would go so far as to sort of ride my round at the track in the warm-up. I'd sort of pick up my canter. I'd think 3 transitions, lengthen, shorten, lengthen, shorten. Then I would go down the first line, leg up. Then I would right-hand turn, sit up for the double, shorten for the 4 stride, left-hand turn. And I would really think about this as I was in the warm-up. So this acknowledgement of my weakness at execution and my compensation by now becoming overly prepared in the warm-up helped me to be as self-aware as possible. And that gave me tremendous confidence. I owned what needed to be done, both good and bad, to perform at my best. Next, you need to create distinctiveness.
So du musst Unerwechselkeit kreieren. Finde, wo du anders bist. Vertrau mir, jeder hat irgendetwas, das ich einzigartig mache. Finde etwas zu sagen. Es kann sein ein internes Glauben, eine Optik. Sag oder tu was, der dich durch den Informationsdschungel bricht. Mach dich unvergesslich. Für mich, das war einfach Selbstausdruck, dass ich meine Identität wusste, wer ich war. Als ich ein kleines Kind war, ich habe immer experimentiert mit meinem Image. Ich habe meinen Haarstil geändert, verschiedene Mode. Mein Reitstil habe ich geändert. Ich suchte stets, was mich bequem
so that I
macht,
could find my voice and my power. Maybe I was somewhat naturally inclined to be distinctive, but it wasn't for lack of effort in trying to express myself on the outside how I felt on the inside. Trial and error might be a crucial part in nailing the right distinctive features. The more ideas you generate, the better chances of figuring out what works and what doesn't. Thomas Edison invented more than 500 things before he came up with the light bulb. So always remember that. Keep trying until it works. It wasn't about until 5 years ago, however, that I realized I could take that internal confidence and image I had built and make it into a commercially viable entity. I began to cultivate that image into a personal brand that had value to the individuals I hopefully inspire and to companies that could capitalize off of my engagement with my audience. I stood for something that aligned with certain brands' ethoses, and together we could inspire others to try products and get behind movements that inspired personal growth, such as my Eurostar by Dani G collection. My brand is about a single belief that inherently everyone on some level just wants to be noticed. Some of us maybe want to be stars, and others at least just want to be acknowledged for who they are. But our choices about how we put ourselves out there declare, this is me. I matter. And it's important to put yourself out there not to impress others, but rather because sharing who you are can resonate with someone else, someone who will get you and appreciate you. Maybe you'll inspire them, or they'll inspire you. But in the end, you will connect. And that breeds confidence and therefore widespread appeal in your personal life and commercially. Companies and individuals love to see people who believe in themselves and are thus trustworthy advocates for ideas or products. That's vital, resonating with your audience. Like I mentioned already, I believe that everyone wants to be noticed. So my brand is always trying to come back to that notion of how can I put myself out there so I can be noticed and appreciated for who I am on the inside, because that gives me confidence. For me, that's wearing beautiful and colorful feathers in my hair, constantly experimenting with my personal style. It used to be kicking the boys' butts in the show ring, and often showing the not-so-perfect moments in life. Those are the things that most resonate within myself and to my audience. And it's how I have been able to differentiate myself from my peers. Remember, if you are genuine and honest and bear it all, people are often so caught off guard they can't do anything but respond with real empathy and emotion, usually because they can relate to it. Relatability is what resonates. Think of all those life hack memes that we all love so much. Find something within yourself that others share. That's what's relatable and will gain traction. So now that you've sort of figured out your why your brand exists, essentially your brand's identity, how do you reach your intended audience? The majority of equine advertising nowadays is done through presence on social media. I think we all sort of admit that, both for brands and as individuals. And social media is driven by stories. Stories are how people communicate with each other. Actually, we always have. So in order to break through the clutter of social media, you need to take your strengths and often your weaknesses and your distinctiveness, your true essence, and your why, your reason for existence, and turn them into an engaging story. And ideally, many engaging stories. But of course, navigating socials well isn't necessarily the simplest of endeavors. I would know. So always remember to come back to your why and ask your audience for feedback constantly. Stick to your story. And when things work, keep doing them. And when things do worse, pivot and try something else. Use the feedback, whether that's through direct engagement with your audience or through metrics, to guide your strategy. And if and when things have inadvertent backlash, which they undoubtedly will have, remember to own your identity as a brand. Own up to the missteps. Get ahead of the haters by admitting fault if there is any, or use humor to deflect. But most importantly, remember your strength and use that for your argument and rationale. Most importantly, you can be tough and be struggling at the same time. Toughness is not synonymous with success, and struggling is not synonymous with failure. Remember, being unique is a gift, and it will give you traction in the long run. A loyal audience will appreciate your candor and sticking to your brand's identity because they will come back to it because that's what they know. If I've learned anything as I've built my brand, there is no one right way to differentiate yourself. Remember, performing well and distinctiveness build brand recognition for your audience. It's about figuring out your own personal strengths and beliefs, having confidence in those choices, and sometimes just saying, fuck it, hold your head up high and take that proverbial leap of faith for what you stand for. Belief in oneself is the best way to differentiate yourself from everyone else? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So
for this keynote.
if you guys have any questions, I would love to answer them, or floor is yours.
Wir laufen einmal mit dem Mikrofon rum. Ich wollte nur das Q&A anmoderieren.
Ja.
Vielen Dank erstmal für dich.
I just have one question. I miss your stories on Instagram. I followed you a lot the last
thank you.
time. Yeah.
Thanks. I've been very quiet on socials recently because I'm building some new things now that I retired from sport. So I'm waiting, but it's coming, I promise. Stay tuned. Anyone else have questions about branding or how to handle socials? I can answer anything you want. It can be about sport. It can be about the feathers. Why did I stop riding? That is a very complicated question. Many reasons. A lot because the sport changed, I think, significantly, and perhaps I didn't change with it. And I didn't have so many top horses. And honestly, I had a lot of other things that I liked in my life, such as the fashion, such as wanting to sort of work with young professionals in the industry outside of my own riding. And I felt like I had done riding for 30 years and I wanted a new life. I woke up one day and said, you know what, I want to try something else in my life. And riding is always here, so I think I can always come back to it. But I don't know, I really felt a shift within myself of wanting to try something else. I saw another question. No?
Haben wir noch eine Frage im Publikum? Irgendwer hat noch eine, oder? Da vorne. Wir holen einmal ein Mikrofon.
Sorry.
Lauf einmal hin. Wir haben einmal ein Mikrofon, dass wir das einmal verstehen. Alle, wir sind neugierig.
Okay. About social media, you know, you hear so much things about you need the right time on Instagram and so on. So you just said you have to be true, that the people feel you. But what else is important, that you get a good brand on Instagram or other social media platforms?
What do you mean exactly? How do you get a good brand?
Do you think it's really more about the pictures, or is it all about the story, or how do you create something? Do you have like a timetable in a month, or do you just do what you want?
Strategy, like long-term strategy, is very important. So doing it like haphazardly with no plan is not smart. As if you're trying to build a brand, if you are an individual and you're just doing it to be social, it's a different story. But if you really want to build a brand, it's very important to have strategy. And the storytelling is by far the most important part, because just putting up pretty photos, nobody cares about pretty photos. I could put 1,000 pretty photos up and you'll get a couple likes and people will scroll right past it. The story and the caption and how they connect and how it connects to your previous post and your future post matters far more, because people want to hear about your journey, not so much just to see. When you put pretty pictures up, it looks like you're bragging, and people don't want to feel disconnected. They want to feel like, oh, they're struggling, she's experiencing this is how I can connect with her, and I want to follow that journey. That's how you build the story and the brand. So it's not so, and it is timing. Look, Instagram is an algorithm that changes constantly. So that's why I say ask for feedback. So every single post, look at your metrics, engage with the audience. Every comment back, question, ask questions, do polls on your stories. Constantly try to get feedback so that you can understand what your audience is looking for and what is resonating with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Hier vorne ist noch eine Frage, da gehen wir einmal mit dem Mikro. Ich husch einfach mal, ich lauf mal. Ich bin schneller. Ich halte das Mikro einmal.
From a representation perspective, how do you think brands, but also perhaps organizations from the top down, could support development when it comes to equity and bridging the accessibility gap to sport?
Great question. The simple answer to that, to begin with, it's not an easy question, so there is no simple answer, but one is, unfortunately, diversity in our sport is lacking. From a participation standpoint as well as brand awareness. So I think trying to bring it in as much as possible is vital. Whether that's through visuals that a brand puts out, I think trying to engage with smaller parts of the community or underrepresented parts of the community is very important. As far as visibility and getting the sport out there, I mean, that's something I have spent so much of my career trying to do and trying to engage with people because I want more eyeballs, right? As an individual, as a rider, I wanted more eyeballs. As a brand, you want more eyeballs. To get that, however, I think it comes from this storytelling and trying to connect with individuals who then organically will share it with their like-minded communities. So I think the visuals as far as getting it out there and then trying to connect with people on a very individual level will help grow the sport. You know, the more that brands can really engage and also expand how they're reaching their audience, that will also help with sort of worldwide engagement, different communities, different approaches. I mean, I think also we should look towards other sports that have been successful in growing and see how they've been able to do it. There are issues within the confines of our sport that we have to that are facts and we have to deal with. But for sure, it's important to find different ways to engage with people to get other audience in. It's not so easy.
Thank you. Und noch jemand eine Frage eventuell? Alle Fragen beantwortet? So I have one.
Yeah.
Was there a special moment where you shared something with your community and you thought, this is really brave, perhaps I'm a little bit afraid, or I don't know if I should share, and afterwards you talked to yourself and it was like, it was a really good idea to share this, even if I was shaking?
Yes, absolutely. Some of my most meaningful things that I've shared, whether it's through socials or regular media, whatever it is, have been the hardest times. Actually, when I was attacked online for bullying for wearing that white outfit that you saw, I got crazy negative comments that I was ruining the sport of show jumping, that I was offending my horse. And those moments when I sat down in front of the camera and just said, like, this is hard to deal with, and then I put that out there, those moments when I got the stories afterwards from other people reacting to my vulnerability, those were some of the most poignant and meaningful things to me, because then I thought, okay, I'm not alone and I'm not the only one struggling, and therefore the more I share this, the more other people sort of say, I also don't feel alone now. And those were the most meaningful, from a brand perspective, they gained the most traction, as well as from an internal perspective. They made me feel like I was part of a community, which is actually the most important part of social media, is being part of something, not putting yourself out there with a wall in front of you. The vulnerability is vital.
Is perhaps showing vulnerability, you know what I mean, one key thing to success?
It has been to mine. Whether or not it is everyone's, hard to say. I think in life, vulnerability is a key to success, because I think if you don't put yourself out there as you are, everything is harder. If you're trying to hide or you're trying to pretend to be something else and not putting your best foot forward and highlighting your strengths, it's very difficult to keep that up. And then people don't see you for who you are, and then they react to you for what they see, not for who you are. And you want people to interact with you as your individual self.
So inspirational. Thank you so much. Haben wir noch Fragen im Publikum? Da ist noch eine. Jetzt trauen Sie sich. Ich husche da einmal hin.
Yes, my English is not so good, but I wanted to ask if you have any recommendations, like on how to make this diversity more attractive to your questions, because one thing I learned is that questions are like, not all of them, but a lot are very skeptical when it comes to new things. And I think there's so many great things on the market, but they don't want to try it. And that's what I would like to make more attractive for them to try it and see it, and not I don't want this. This is new.
I think that's a great question, similar to the one over there. It's very difficult. The equestrian community is not an open-minded one, unfortunately. People are also very traditional and very conservative. But what I have found is that when you're able to, again, it comes back to that storytelling. When you're able to tell a story about an individual that is diverse in some way, whatever that reason may be, if that one person can connect with another individual, it makes it much easier than that's why I say you don't want to just put up a photo and it have no connection or no story. You need to sort of have backstory with it and explain. So I think it's those small steps of individual sort of storytelling with different diversity groups, whatever they may be, to try to reach individuals and it grow a bit more organically from that. Because I think when you put out a big campaign with diversity, then people look at it and there's not enough diversity in the sport, so then the majority look at it and say, okay, but that's not really me. So you need to try to connect to the individuals. At least that's my feeling on it. And then have backstory so that people could say, oh, but I have a similar experience to this person. They look similar to me. They've had the same struggles that I've had. And therefore, you will gain a little bit more from each individual customer, so to speak. I think that's the way to do it. That's at least how I approach it.
And one more question over there. You brought some time?
Yeah, keep coming.
Hi, I'm Laura. Nice to meet you. I wanted to ask that if in high-pressure communities such as the equestrian, you find it important to be able to switch off, go somewhere, and where do you find your inspiration in general?
2 questions. Where do I find my inspiration in general? All over the place. Yeah, I think all different things. That's why a little bit to the question of why did I stop riding, I had a lot of other interests in the world. So I was always inspired by the fashion world, by the cooking world, by different things. So my inspiration comes from a lot of different things, and I'm always reading a lot. I read a lot, and I'm watching videos and trying to sort of consume as many things as possible and find inspiration. And I get little sparks in different places. I saw a dress from the Met Gala 5 years ago, and that inspired these feathers. I saw someone walking down the street in New York who had her hair dyed 2 different colors. That was another inspiration for feathers. It comes from random places. As to your other question of how do you switch off because of the pressure of the horse world, you need to find outlets. For me, Monday was a very sacred day, and I always tried to be very quiet on Mondays. When it comes to building a brand, Mondays are actually quite an important day with branding. So that's why you have scheduling on social, so you don't have to think about it that day. But for me, it was very much finding a moment where I could shut off and go do the other things that I liked, where I was inspired. If that was take a Monday and read a book, or take a Monday and walk around, whatever city I was in from a horse show and get inspired by the local community. So it was always just trying to find moments. And then, there are times when the pressure from social media and things like that, turn off the comments if you don't want to listen to it. Don't look at it. Try to figure out a way to disconnect yourself if it's causing really internal strife.
Vielen Dank. Haben wir noch eine Frage? Da hinten ist noch eine. Da kannst du vielleicht einmal rüberlaufen. Nie das Mikrofon abgeben, ne?
Hello, how are you doing? Can I just ask you, do you think my product is kind the rein right?
Do I think it's what?
A kind product for the horse?
In my opinion, yes. I think that's a great product.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, das war ein kleiner Werbeslot, den wir haben. Haben wir denn noch eine echte Frage? Noch irgendeine Frage? Nein. I think we're finished.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. We see you later here on stage.
Yes, I'll be back later.
During our top innovations. How was it to be part of the jury of the top innovations?
It was amazing. The top innovations prize, which is coming up later, I got to look at so many different innovative products on the market. It was fascinating and it was an honor to be a judge.
And it took a little bit of time?
Yes, it took a lot of time. I spent a lot of time reading through and researching each product.
So we see you later. Thank
Great.
you so much.
Thank you,
Dani G.
everyone.
Waldman.